These two turkeys, a Tom and a female, they were supposed to go to the freezer over half a year ago, but they're still here. And in this video, I'm gonna tell you why we decided not to dispatch those two, why we kept them, and all of the things that we have learned by raising turkeys beyond their initial butcher date. Because if you just raise turkeys for meat, for a couple of months, then all you can learn is limited to the time frame. But since we kept two of those turkeys for longer, we've learned a lot of things that we would have otherwise probably not learned. So in this video, I'm going to tell you everything about what we've learned about turkeys, their egg laying capacity, their feed requirements, their shelter requirements, and anything in between. How are they, as part of our free-ranging chicken, guinea, turkey flock here in our backyard. And maybe before we get there, let me share you why we decided to keep those two turkeys. Because as I mentioned before, we raised turkeys last year in 2024 for the reason of putting a bird on the Thanksgiving dinner table and then sharing some of those turkeys with friends who also appreciate the benefits of having a pasture-raised and responsibly raised turkey instead of buying it from the store. And one of the things we decided early on was that we didn't want to go with the typical production, turkeys, broad-breasted, white turkeys that everyone does, because I consider them junk food. They're much like the Cornish cross, So we decided to go with artisanal black turkeys from McMurray Hatchery. Think of them as like the Red Rangers of the turkeys, so slower growing. It took us actually almost 4 months to grow them out to butcher weight. But one of the things we noticed early on was that turkey chicks are a little bit more fragile than their chicken counterparts. And we lost a few actually in the first couple of days. And Holly here, the hen, was the smallest bird of the flock. We had, I think, 10 or so turkeys, and she was the tiniest one from the get-go. She was growing slower, and then at some point she had an eye infection, or someone pecked her in the eye. An injury. It was difficult to tell, but it was certainly, there was inflammation going on in her eye, and I thought we would have to dispatch her, but the kids convinced us that we wanna, try to treat it, and maybe she would heal and grow up to be a healthy turkey. And so we treated her eye twice a day with eye drops and all those things, and it turned out, she actually healed. But because of all of those treatments, all of us bonded with her. And then when it came time to dispatch the turkeys, the kids said, well, let's keep Holly. I mean, they had named her at that point already, and I'm like, you know what, let's keep one turkey. We can only eat so many turkeys for Thanksgiving, so we'll keep Holly. But we didn't want to keep her alone. They are flock animals, obviously, and even though they are part of the chicken crew, they were fairly tight with our guineas and with the rest of the turkeys. So we said, you know what, let's keep a male turkey, a Tom, as well, with the idea that maybe they're gonna make babies. And so for the following year, we didn't have to buy turkey chicks. They would raise them for us, and then we have another turkey on the dinner table without us having to do the whole brooding and, the whole 9 yards. So that was the idea. And of course, at that time, I didn't really realize that those type of turkeys are likely too big to mate naturally. So they are typically artificially inseminated. That's what the hatcheries do. We didn't take that into account, but we decided we're gonna keep the Tom. His name is actually Tom, I know, very smart. And the hen, her name is Holly, or Little One. And we decided we're gonna keep those two. And a couple of things that we learned as well. One, obviously, is they need more protein in their feed. So they have higher protein requirements, which means, and that's especially true if you wanna raise them, for meat. If you want them, to develop, good muscle tissue, broad breast and stuff, you wanna raise them with high protein feed. But later on then, like right now, they're just eating chicken feed and whatever they can find, on pasture. So they are, at this point, we no longer feed them any special feed, and I'll talk about the nuance of that here in a little bit. The second thing we noticed, that as soon as they were old enough to roost, they preferred roosting up high as possible. And so we actually built them this Justin Rhodes inspired turkey show, he calls it. And the original design was meant to have the roof right here, and they would roost actually on roosting bars going up this way. And our turkeys would just roost on top of the roof, and that would expose them not only to the elements if it rained or whatever, but also to predators at night, like night owls or owls night owls, owls who are more active at night. And so what we had to do was we had to raise the roof up so they could roost relatively high but still be protected from the elements and from any predators, if you will. But the problem was, by roosting up relatively high, considering how heavy those birds are, because they had been, up until that point, raised on grower feed, which is very high in protein. So they were so big that they face planted every single time they came down from the roosting bar or from their roosts. And Tom actually lost all of his feathers. In the beginning, we thought that he might have, mites or being pecked on by the guineas who are constantly fighting with him. But it turned out that every time he landed, he scraped his chest, and that's why he lost all of his feathers. He was just too heavy to land on his feet, and that was not only a problem, a cosmetic problem, with his feathers, but I figured he might break his leg one day or injure his joint. And you can actually see, I'm gonna show you. I mean, he's still a big dude, but he lost all of his feathers, but they are now coming back in here. You can see already. Yeah, you were a heavy dude. But the feathers are now coming back in because he lost weight. And why did he lose weight? Well, because he's now eating chicken feed, which is less protein or has less protein. And in the beginning, I was concerned that he would be losing too much weight because he might have higher protein requirements than the chickens, even though they are free range and pasture-raised and everything. So they can obviously augment their diet with whatever they can find. I think actually that they have reached a weight that is sustainable and healthy for them. I think the weight they had, shortly after their cousins got dispatched, I think that was actually too much. They had too much weight, and I can kind of tell based on the hen, who is eating the same feed as the tom, that she appears to be healthy because she is laying 5 eggs a week. Almost every single day we get an egg from the hen, which is impressive because I did not think that turkeys were good egg layers, specifically not those production turkeys that are meant to be raised for meat. But she is actually a fairly good egg layer. Now I can't tell you yet how well she's gonna do in winter because she started laying in spring. Now we are in summer. So during that period, 5 eggs a week, very consistent, almost as good as our guineas, which also surprised us because they are laying an egg. The guinea hen lays an egg every single day. The funny thing is they don't use the nesting boxes of the chickens because especially the turkey hen is too big. She just goes into the hen house and builds her nest there. And every single day, the guinea hen and the turkey hen lay an egg in the same spot in the hen house. So that's very impressive. I did not expect that. Speaking of those eggs, they are bigger, obviously. They look incredibly good, very rich golden yolk, incredibly delicious, and a fairly thick shell. And what's a little bit annoying, I want to say, is that the membrane inside of the shell is so thick that it's almost impossible to crack an egg without making a huge mess. So in other words, you bang the egg, you crack it, and then you try to stick your thumbs in to break those two shell halves apart. You cannot get through that membrane without using a lot of pressure and then puncturing the yolk as well. So I always end up with either fragments of the eggshell or with a complete scrambled eggs, basically, even if I wanted to make regular fried eggs, because that membrane is so incredibly thick. That's a little bit of a downside. So if you only eat turkey eggs, I think it gets old fairly quickly because it's a mess just cracking those eggs open. But they're big, they're good, they're probably very nutritious, and I love them, except for the cracking part. What else do we have? Well, as far as, feed, they eating our chicken feed. That seems to be working perfectly fine. She is drinking from the nipples. For him, we have a separate water bowl because he can retract that skin thing that's hanging over his beak. So it changes in size, much like, I guess, the male reproductive organ. So he can kind of, dial it way back and could potentially drink from a nipple, but I've installed a separate bowl for him, so it's easier for him to drink. That's one thing we've noticed. Oh, that's a little bit of extra work. The other extra work we have with the turkeys and with the guineas alike really is, we have this separate shelter out there because he wouldn't even fit through any of the chicken doors here. He would be too big, and opening the door every night and trying to get him in wouldn't work either. And they really like to roost out here at night, which means we have a separate electric fence going around it. So every night I have to plug in the electric fence. Every morning I have to unplug it to let them out. That's a little bit of a downside because it complicates evening and morning chores, but that's really I want to say a small price to pay for all of the things that we have learned about raising turkeys. And what we're going to do, I think, moving forward with turkeys is we might still do those artisanal black turkeys because they're incredibly delicious. Every single one of our friends we gave a turkey to said it was the best turkey they've ever had. We absolutely loved ours. It was delicious, flavorful meat. But I think going forward, we're going to do a combination of those guys and heritage breeds that can really reproduce by themselves. So we don't have to raise turkeys. We let the birds do it. And so every year we have hopefully a fresh turkey that have been raised by the turkeys. So we have less work. And I think that's what we're going to do going forward. Now, one of the things, I should point out with turkeys is that they are incredibly loud. At least our hen is. I mean, right now she has calmed down, fortunately, because this is the second take of this video. The first one, she was so loud that I had to stop it. But anytime they see us, they vocalize. And they're incredibly docile as well. I mean, wherever we are, you can be sure at least Tom is close by. He always comes around, stays close to us. If we open the fence and let them, just go out, willy-nilly, they come where we are. They're incredibly docile. They're incredibly vocal. Not so much him. I mean, he is fairly quiet, but the hen louder than the roosters and louder than the guineas. And that was a surprise because I certainly did not expect that. So keep that in mind if you have neighbors and they don't necessarily appreciate loud livestock, keeping turkey hens might not be the best approach if you keep them for longer than a couple of weeks. Speaking of, it took us almost 4 months to grow these. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this already, but you know, they're a slower growing breed, and it took us, I think we were 1 week or 10 days short of the 4-month cutoff when we dispatched them, all of their cousins. So they took significantly longer than other breeds. That means it's more expensive, but for us, you know, having a higher quality product, better quality meat, healthier bird trumps the more feed maybe and the longer time it takes to raise them. We are not in a commercial turkey business. We're not doing this for profit. We're doing this to stay as healthy as we possibly can, and that means slower growing breeds. Now regarding feed, one thing before we wrap this up, we do feed them extra brewer's yeast, and the reason for that is because brewer's yeast has protein, obviously, and so we give them the option to increase their protein intake. So you can see down here, there is brewer's yeast in this feeder. We offer it free choice, and funny enough, what we've noticed also by offering that to turkeys, the chickens, especially in winter when there is less insects in the pasture and stuff, they eat a lot of that brewer's yeast too, and that has been, I think, one of the factors why our egg production in winter was relatively well, because they just got enough protein all throughout the year instead of just having to rely on the regular feed. But yeah, that is our turkeys. Tom, aptly named after, well, the fact that he is a Tom, and Holly, aka Little One, that we treated a lot with her eye infection when she was a baby, and she kind of turned into a pet, and there is no way of dispatching her, unfortunately, because the kids, especially one kid who is a specialist in bonding with animals. So those are the two, Tom, Holly. Let us know, have you raised turkeys before for extended periods, that is? I mean, beyond the butchering date? What have you learned? Let us know. I'm always interested to hear the experience of others, what they've learned. Those are our 2 turkeys. We love them, and we can't wait to raise even more turkeys and guineas in the future on the new property. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who could use it. I'll see you in the next one.